Yeah. That question that Matty was having there, I found myself, like after Dad died, thinking of the good things why he wasn't there.
Yep.
You know, I don't know. I didn't sort of look back to think how bad it was or sad it was, or
Good things that he wasn't here on Earth,
yeah,
you mean?
that he was gone.
You were happy that he was gone? It's okay to be honest about it. Yeah. Do you mind saying why you were happy that he's gone?
Oh, I kept a lot more skin.
Sorry, you...
I kept a lot more hide, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. So can you see that feeling of happiness that he's gone is sort of the storage of the anger?
Yeah, and I just wonder his denial too, in not looking at the whole picture rather than just that he wasn't there.
Yeah, well, storing the anger causes you to avoid the grief. So this is why when you say the words, I'm happy that he's gone, that you start almost crying, right? Because all the reasons why you're happy he's gone start coming up. This is a good thing. Yeah. So the reality is, if somebody passes that you don't want to be in your life in the first place, and you feel happy that he's gone, but understand that is an anger-based feeling covering over grief. But say to yourself, I'm happy he's gone. Why are you happy he's gone? Oh, because... And as you start saying the becauses, the reasons, you'll start feeling some of these things.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. But see, a lot of times it's our belief that, we're not allowed to do that. You know? We're not allowed to do that. That's not very spiritual, you know. That's not very, together.
You feel real guilty about it.
Exactly.
Really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And guilt is an addiction to avoid emotion.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good.
And guilt is driven by fear, of course. An avoidance of fears, in particular.
Okay.
So what we need to do is even the things that we feel terribly guilty about, all those things we need to acknowledge and say, this is how I do feel. And when you say that, it takes away the power of the avoidance so much that eventually we start getting into the feelings. So I'm allowed to not cry. Often you'll say that to yourself and then all of a sudden you start crying.
Yeah.
Just acknowledging that you're allowed to choose differently gives you the permission to also choose to feel. So you have free will. You're allowed to not cry. You have free will. You're allowed to stay in denial for the rest of your existence. And then the question is, well, do I want to stay in denial? It's not, do I have to? It's, do I want to?
Do I want to? Yeah, okay.
Like, I'm allowed to be angry. You're allowed to be angry. God's made a universe in which you're allowed to be angry for the rest of your life if you want to be.
Right. It's not a good feeling, though.
No. The question is, do you want to? Then, right? That's always the question. But God made a universe where you're allowed to. You're not going to have very good results doing it, but you're allowed to choose to do it if you want to do it. Right? So you're allowed to make these choices, even choices that are unloving. You're allowed to make them. That's what free will is. There will be negative consequences if you act out of harmony with love with those choices, but that's what free will is too. The ability to choose these negative consequences. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
There you go, AJ. Very good. Thank you.
So I would, you know how you said earlier in private where you said you felt a bit locked up? Guilt's locking you up with the stuff with your dad. Does that make sense? This belief that you're not allowed to feel certain things that you actually do feel. So be honest about what you feel. I was happy when Dad died. And then say to yourself all the reasons why you were happy, and you'll find yourself getting into some grief pretty quick. Yeah? And then you...
brings on the forgiveness.
So just say it into a mic, yeah?
And then that will take him into the forgiveness for his dad?
Well, yeah, initially he'll feel the anger, all the things Dad did to me and I didn't deserve it, and and all these things. And then he gets into the fear of maybe Dad didn't love me and it was all my fault and all those other kinds of emotions that generally come up. And then you get into the grief of just being treated badly or not being loved and not being cared for, not being wanted, whatever other emotions there are with your dad. And once you feel that, that'll all be gone. And once that's gone, you will have forgiven, and that's all you'll feel. That's all you'll feel. Yeah, it is nice. It is nice. So in my first century life, when I was 7 years of age, my father sent me to a, what would you call it now? It's sort of like a military college. But back then it wasn't that defined, there wasn't very good rules. And there were Roman soldiers who run this college, and they had women who they used as prostitutes and their daughters that they used to abuse. And they had guys, you were put through this course of having to do all of these physical things in order to prove your prowess. I was 7 years old. Right? I wasn't very happy. Can you imagine? I wasn't very happy with the whole thing at all. And the straw that broke the camel's back for me is I saw one of the girls my age being sexually abused by guys my age, right? And the soldiers were making them do it in order to toughen them up and make them desensitised, right? And I just wouldn't go anymore. And in through all of that, I had to forgive my dad for a lot of things. Yeah. Just a lot of pain and suffering that he put me through in that process. Right? And I realised that in that place, and it was short, by the time I was 12, I realised I had to let it all go. If I didn't, I was just going to be angry with my father all the time. Yeah. And that anger with my father would define my life. I would make choices, decisions, all sorts of things based around it. And I didn't want to do that anymore. Yeah. So I had to go through this process. Let myself go through a process. It's a very important thing. And at that age I learnt the importance of forgiveness. But I also learnt what was involved. I learnt that you couldn't fake it. You couldn't push through it. You couldn't intellectualise yourself into a place where you think you've forgiven. You couldn't make it better when it wasn't better at all. You couldn't avoid the results of everything that occurred. You couldn't. And I also realised that once you'd forgiven somebody, that didn't mean that they would change. They might stay the same. And I had to feel about all that as well, like the feeling that it was wrong to forgive them when they wouldn't change. You imagine your own daughter or son being abused by a pedophile, and then you having to go through the process of forgiveness. You come out the other end of the process of forgiveness knowing that you've forgiven the person, you're in a state of happiness and joy now with that person, but they still might abuse another child. You have to have gotten rid of a lot of emotion to do that, don't you? Yeah. So this is where it's a very, like, God puts us through sincere processes. They can't be processes that we manufacture. They have to be sincere processes. So we need to acknowledge that each process is a sincere process that we need to go through. And this is a process that we're going to need to go through with regard to almost everything that we feel hurt about. Yeah. So, when your wife rejects you sexually, yeah, there's a whole process you're going to have to go through to forgive her. When your husband just comes home and expects you to go to bed with him, there's a whole process you're going to have to go through to forgive him. When it's happened year after year after year after year after year, there's going to be a fair few processes to go through to forgive him. Can you see that? Because there's all this stored up emotion about that. This is why most people in their relationships are not close with each other. Because there's so much stored up emotion that it's like a great big wall between two people. And unless the release of emotion occurs, unless this process occurs, of forgiveness occurs, the stored up emotion between those two people will just be like a barrier, a constant barrier, dictating the rest of their life. And you could think of forgiveness as sort of wiping away the barrier. But remember, the barrier is emotional. It's based on what's going on inside of your soul. It's not an intellectual place. It's a place that you truly feel. And to do that, you're going to have to sincerely go through some emotions and release them and get rid of them out of yourself. And it takes courage to choose that process. Because a lot of people will tell you that process doesn't work. A lot of people will tell you that it's not, it's not right, that you should forgive somebody when they're still doing the same thing wrong. They'll tell you all sorts of things. They'll tell you to not forgive, you should stay angry with them. They'll tell you all sorts of things when you go through this process, because the process is going to require some grief. You'll feel some fear, you'll feel some anger, and people will say to you, why are you doing all that for? All right, so there's a lot of judgment about all of that. Yeah.